Welcome to Airway Exchange, the podcast for empowering educators and inspiring future CRNAs, a new series of Beyond the Mask supported by AANA.
We're your host team. I'm Greg Collins.
I'm Nickie D'Amico.
I'm Erin Martin.
And I'm Louisa Martin. We're here to support the community of CRNA educators with conversations to explore, learn, and grow.
To pursue excellence in the evolving field of nurse anesthesia education.
And to champion our students and enrich the future of the profession.
This is Airway Exchange. Welcome back to Airway Exchange. This is one of your hosts, Nickie D'Amico, and I'm thrilled to be joined in the studio today with my co-host, Greg Collins. How are you, Greg?
Great, Nickie. Thanks for having me.
So excited to talk with our guest today. We are joined by Dr. Hallie Evans, who is a nurse anesthesia educator and innovator dedicated to advancing the profession through transformative education, meaningful research, and collaborative learning environments. She is widely recognized as a thought leader in nurse anesthesiology education, program development, and faculty mentoring, with a career defined by her commitment to excellence, growth, and innovation. She's currently pursuing a PhD in nursing at Florida State University with a research focus on innovative stigma-reducing methods to educate and support both patient and student populations. She is also the current Senior Director of Education and Professional Development at the American Association of Nurse Anesthesiology, where she leads strategic efforts to enhance professional growth, lifelong learning, and academic innovation nationwide. In addition to her educational and administrative work, Dr. Evans maintains an active clinical anesthesia practice, ensuring her teaching remains grounded in current real-world applications. Her professional approach bridges innovation with compassion, with a clear focus on learner success, academic integrity, and the continued growth of the nurse anesthesiology profession. Wow, quite an accomplished guest for us today. Welcome, Dr. Evans.
Oh, thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
We have so much to jump into. There's so much that we both want to talk to you about today. I'd love it if you would just start with telling us just a little bit more about your background as a nurse anesthesia educator.
Sure. So in 2008, I graduated CRNA school. And my last semester, I was already teaching in the simulation lab. I worked out a deal for, I think they paid for my NCE exam in return for working in the simulation lab. And so it kind of started there. And I ended up taking a position where I was a student. And so right off the bat, I was precepting the day I started working. And I really, really loved that. Then when the option came at the same school, I went to Florida International University for my master's degree. They had a program that was, if you were precepting their students, you could go back and get your doctorate for free. I mean, I paid for textbooks.
Free?
Yes.
Wow.
Even then, sadly, it took like a year of convincing. I didn't do it the first class that they did it. I did it with the second cohort. And I thought, I'm never going to use this. Like, I do not need this doctorate degree. But at the same time, they were one of the first schools to transition to a doctorate program. And they were graduating doctorate students that were coming to work with me. And I thought, like, I want to have the same degree as these people graduating, after me here. So that's what really made me go back and do it. I had 2-year-old twins. I remember when I went for my interview, they were like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, I do not know. Other than my chief at the time was like, Hallie, we need to do this. And I followed him blindly. So we did it together. I had a nice support system. And then when I finished that, they ended up offering me a position to teach Florida International University also. So I started right away teaching there and stayed there for a few years. And then summer 2020, we all know how that went.
Things changed a little.
I just needed a change. I needed to get out of Miami, and a position that was remote opened up at Middle Tennessee School of Anesthesia. And so I took that, and first I was just overseeing the doctorate completion students' projects. And that kind of segued into directing the doctorate completion program and writing a full curriculum and prospectus for a nurse anesthesia educator program. And so it's the only one of its kind that is accredited by SACS, and really the only one that I know of in the United States. So that was kind of the segue. And I did that because I had so many students coming back for the completion degree just because they wanted to teach. And I felt like the program still didn't do a great job in teaching them how to teach. And I also felt that the students that I was teaching at through a regular CRNA program were just looking for a little bit more of innovative and immersive ways to learn than traditional lecturing. The students have changed, as we all know, from when we went to school. And so that's really where I was before I came over to AANA.
You talk about your track going almost immediately into education. And traditionally, we've always had this mindset. This came up at the early educator workshop in February at Edge, where a lot of us historically felt like we had to come out and sort of get our feet wet and really establish our clinical career before we would make that jump. And that's just off the table. That's not an option if we're going to keep our programs open. So do you recommend that path with the right support?
With the right support. So my program director, when I was a student, is still one of my biggest mentors and biggest advocates and champions, and encouraged me to just, go for it. But also tells me pull back, Hallie, you're not ready for that. I think having the right support and people around you is so important. And I did teach, just as a preceptor for a good 5-ish years before I got into education, and maybe even a little bit longer than that. I just, years all run together after a certain point.
Some have wait periods, though. I mean, they'll make their folks wait a year or 2 years or whatever before they'll let them even precept. And I'm of a different mindset. I think
Indeed.
Now get folks going. The better you are at teaching someone something, the better you are at knowing that information, because you don't want to look like you don't know it.
I was just having a discussion on a point you just said. I think we should be, and I know it's not a priority, don't get me wrong, teaching students that last semester or in professional development how to precept, right? Because while some might have that 1-year waiting period, I can tell you most of the places that I've worked, one day you're a student, a week later, you can be a preceptor. And it's really that knowing how to teach, how to create that growth mindset environment that's supportive and fosters learning that not everybody just clicks and gets. So,
correct.
Hallie, we've all given our origin story here on the podcast in terms of host. Yours is definitely unique, and I appreciate you sharing that. One of the things you mentioned multiple times, you talked about a chief and then a mentor at school. Kind of give me your take on, and maybe a story about exactly that. We've called it colloquially the tap that we got that said, hey, you need to go into education. And all of us have shared that story. You shared it obviously when we started. The importance of mentorship in that space, even though yours was a little bit more compressed into when you went into entry level to practice. Give us your take, and I know you've done some research and presentation on this, about the importance of faculty mentorship for those that are interested, both in terms of what to know, but also who to know and how to get there.
It takes a village, for sure. As an educator, you have to know about research, you have to know about evidence-based practice, you have to know how to practice, you have to know how to teach, you have to know how to write an article, and we all can't be good at everything. So first off, I think identifying the people that are and really using them. But one thing, kind of even taking a few steps back from that, is don't burn any bridges. And keep your contacts. Like my program director, I had two because one was deployed during school. So the one, Dr. Hogan, who was deployed while I was in school, we are doing our PhD together now. And we just presented together at Edge. I mean, I keep in touch with these people. I bother them to the point where they probably don't want to be bothered. But I've never lost contact with the people that have really mentored and shaped who I am. And same with Dr. Groom. He's now the, I don't want to missay his position, but I believe an associate dean of the simulation at University of Miami. And we've always kept in touch. So I have always kept in touch with the people that have mentored me and made a difference in my career from the beginning. And so if you're going right into education, or maybe you've taken a few years off and are going back, reach back out to those people. It's never too late. And, I think it's important to keep those connections, not just kind of use somebody for their skills and maybe you see them, maybe you don't. I keep in close contact. They know everything, major that's happening in my life. I reach out to them, even for advice to take a new position, just to see, bounce ideas and things like that. But I really believe in like a mosaic kind of mentoring process where you are finding, maybe there is someone that's good at 2 or 3 things, but it's a lot of time for one person to mentor you on everything. And it's not always the most productive, time-effective way. So I think whether you work somewhere where they pair you with a mentor and it's kind of a formal process, that you still reach out for kind of those informal mentorships where you see someone really succeeding and writing grants or teaching using innovation and also really being proactive as a mentee. Like, I know that I don't know how to do this. There's a lot of new faculty self-assessments to realize your areas of growth. We won't say weakness, but areas to grow. And so knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and reaching out to the right people.
I've heard that called, I think, building your C-suite or building your team or something, but it really resonates because the mentors that I've had in my life, it is for certain things, for certain parts of my job, but definitely not for others. I mean, I've not found a single person yet who comprehensively is strong at all of the things that I want to develop in, me and my portfolio, my career. So I love that. I think it resonates a lot for many of us where, you just have to find Team Hallie,
find your
Team
people.
Nickie, those folks that are willing to lean in with you. And I think people are genuinely, we have such a supportive profession. We really do. And people, they love to see you go out and do great things, and they're thrilled to be able to continue to be a part of that. But I think you've done actual more research and spoken on that topic. I'd love it if you would tell us a little bit more about that, about some of the work that you've presented on in terms of, formal mentorship programs.
Yeah. So the first time I was involved in one was probably 10 years ago with FAANA. And that was, that was a student mentoring program. And, same thing, I still keep in touch with that student. But as far as mentoring faculty, one of the things at my last position that I did is I created a whole mentorship plan with exactly what we're talking about, with certain skills to check off and find somebody that matches you. And then also for people that are going into education, I created a system for them to find students to mentor. So you should always be giving back and learning how to do what you're expecting others to do. And I found that really helped people become better mentees. So I think with what I set up before, it really allowed mentors, mentees to do both roles and see the good and the bad and what was productive, what wasn't for them and for others. And I found that to be the most effective thing, is to kind of, in a pilot short time, have people fill both roles so they can learn what they're looking for in both positions. Because, 20 years from now, I will still need a mentor for 30 things. So it never ends.
I think a theme that I'm hearing as you're going along and telling your story is the importance of building relationships. It's not just a mentor-mentee relationship. It becomes much more than that. And it becomes somebody that really you can count on when things are going great, but also when they aren't. So I appreciate you sharing that story. And I would encourage all of our listeners to make sure that you surround yourself with people like that, people that are willing to buy into you and what your ambition is, and that you can give back to as well.
I have a question. I'm not sure. I don't want to put you too much on the spot here. I've attended a very lengthy leadership program, and we spent a considerable amount of time. A good component of that program was participating in a formal mentorship program. But in advance of that, we spent a lot of time talking about what mentorship was not. It is very different from a therapist, from a coach, from all of these other similar roles. Can you help us tease that out?
Yeah, and I spoke actually with another mentor of mine, Susan McMullen, just to give you an idea. I can't remember how long ago, but at Edge one year, they had a pre-conference writing workshop, and you could choose to join a writing group after. And so I did, and she was kind of our lead. And so it was very fun. I got to present with her on mentorship this year at Edge. And she really spoke on, the difference between mentoring and coaching. So coaching is, like if you think of a soccer coach, right? There's a team, a long effort, a whole season, right? But there's an end to it. There's a goal. And it's a lot of support, right? Like your coach is out there cheering you on, giving you some advice and feedback. But then when you get into a mentor, you don't necessarily get the rah-rah. You get support in a different way. You get support by getting the information, working on a specific task, and getting to the end there and deciding if you need to reevaluate that relationship to learn the next thing. And so sometimes I think it's important in a mentorship to establish, like, what are you okay with me sharing with you? Is it okay if I text you when I'm upset? Or do you want to stick to email communication? I think those are all boundaries. And every mentorship does not have to look the same. So some may have, some of that venting aloud. But I think you really need to establish that before you, almost a mentorship contract. Like, how much of this can I come to you with? Or is this something, I go home and call my best friend and complain about? So there can be a lot of overlap is the answer. But I think it's important to set those boundaries up front.
It was definitely a part of this. It hinted that there had been some issues with it, but it was a contract. And we had to say, these are the shared expectations. What I will offer into this relationship, what you will offer into it, what I expect and what you expect. And it worked great. It was really a beautiful example of what a true mentorship role could be, a more formal one versus the many informal mentorship.
Right.
I think those behaviors are contagious too. When you do that, I think that you're more likely to do that than when you turn around and then become a mentor. I think that, and really in all facets, particularly even our relationships with our residents, I think, a lot of similarity from what Nickie was saying in terms of that's the way I establish a relationship with our residents and with our students on campus. And so I think that's a good way just to look at life, a good example of being a professional in this industry that really requires such. So thank you for explaining that. I want to transition just a little bit. So we highlighted some of your accomplishments in your bio. Obviously, you have a very extensive, well-qualified CV. Tell me about how that led you eventually to the AANA.
Well, honestly, I wasn't looking. And my old boss will be very happy to hear this. We're still very close. I was not looking for anything. And someone approached me and I heard about this position. And I had been doing one thing I didn't mention as much at my last job too, building our CE program out there. And so I was doing nurse educator conferences and other CE opportunities there. And so this really fit. Like, another thing was I was getting to innovate there. So I was getting to incorporate AI and do all these, fun new technological things with simulation and with education in general. And when they approached me, if I read the job description, it could not have been more perfect for the parts of my job that I loved the most, And so it really didn't take much for me to say, okay, I'm putting in my name into the hat here, And so I was creating educational materials there for educators as well as professional development, making CEs. And that's exactly what this position is. I mean, I cover both of those territories, if you will. So on one side with professional development, we are innovating. We are trying to make things interactive and fun and take CEs to the limit. And then on the other side, if you are a CE provider, we are accrediting you through AANA. And so those are kind of the two hats I wear. And so have been a CE provider, I'm very familiar. I've been very familiar with the people even in that department. I've asked them. That was probably the thing I was most scared of when I joined AANA is like, these people hate me because I have asked them so many questions over the year. They're going to be like, you hired her? And so I had my, my fingers in both worlds already. So it's really what I was doing before minus the students. And I do miss the students, but I just think of this as doing it on such a grander level that it was too good to pass up.
Having had some touch points with the CE piece of the AANA, I'm going to guess they didn't think anything like that about you. They're incredibly helpful, just lovely people. I wouldn't think anything about it at all. So tell us a little bit more about how the average member would see evidence of the work you're doing. I think we're an easy audience because we both know very well, but I'd love our listeners to hear a little bit more about new things they might notice or particularly some of the offerings for members.
Yeah, so we are building our online LMS CE portfolio at, I don't want to say at warp speed, but as fast as we can. So we have some really exciting new online CEs coming out. So we're going to have an AI series soon that we get emails all the time asking for, kind of a leadership advocacy series coming out, as well as micro-credentials. And I really want people to understand the value of a micro-credential because sometimes that's lost. You know, these micro-credentials are rigorous. There's multiple levels to them. They're paired with workshops, and they're really for the providers, the CRNAs, to show that they have ownership in this field. They are becoming leaders in this field. They're publishing in this field. There's more to it than just taking the modules. So those are changes you're going to see more in the immediate future. And then at Congress, we have revamped the POCUS workshop to go with our POCUS online modules. And this is actually our first time. Before we didn't have the online modules through AANA. So that's all completely new and very exciting. Another thing you're going to see at Congress, that if you are not into processed EEG, come please to our, I will turn you into a believer. So we have a simulator that shows the spectral array behind the BIS number and breaks down the EEG readings to the different waveforms and makes it so you don't care what that BIS number says. You now have an understanding of what is actually happening in your patient's brain, how they're doing. You know, you see different things with age, pre-existing conditions, and it is so interesting, the different medication profiles. So that is new, and that will also have online modules to go along with the in-person events. We're also adding some advanced airway contents. We know we're airway experts, but you know there's so many new pieces of equipment coming out all the time now. So we're trying to keep up with technology, with our education. Really exciting, not for CE, but we are going to have some sprinkled interaction. I don't want to give too much away at Congress this year. A lot more hands-on opportunities. And then we're already looking like at 2027. And that Congress, I think you will see me sprinkled more over. It's going to be very interactive. We're going to have a lot of simulations and hands-on opportunities for learners. So it's not just the lecture style presentations.
That's been a long time criticism where, you know, you're going to conferences, you have these, you know, amazing educators, but yet largely the content being delivered has been lectures, and many of us are tired of that. It's not how we teach, and it's not how we prefer to learn. So how exciting. This is so great.
I'm very excited for what's ahead. Yeah.
Kind of a broader question related to what you were talking about. In terms of the process of CE delivery and consumption, I think we're all seasoned enough here that, you know, I used to get the CEs by tearing out the pages in the ANA journal and folding them up and mailing them in with a check. Where do you see, obviously we've shifted a lot since that time, but where do you see it going from now within the next maybe 5 or 10 years?
So I think we're going to see a lot more competency-based continuing education, and we have a process already for that. That's something I just got back from our accreditors conference. That is a big trend in education, and you'll be able to get more CEs for the same time period when it's more hands-on and competency-based. So I think that's where it's headed. People want that interaction. They want to put their hands, play with the new equipment while they're learning at the same time. So I really like this model of kind of pre-delivering some content so you can really practice it as you would in practice when you get to the CE setting.
That's great. I think we all learn that way. All of our personalities are driven in that direction, everybody in anesthesia, and I think that's a good way to look at that, and a strong movement in that direction, I think, is what we need.
We've already noticed, I think, some of these changes at Congress this past year. So I just love that we're going to continue to see more and more of the, you know, breakouts and workshops, and Edge was the same. We saw some of those hands-on opportunities there, and more time to really practice the skills that you're learning and talking about. So I'm just guessing based on the feedback that I've heard around these conferences and experienced myself that, you know, it's going to be very well received by the membership.
I hope so. You know, we're just trying to keep it as engaging and still all the academic integrity that goes with a CE. to better support the members at all different levels, you know. So that's another change you'll actually see is some more advanced content for our expert level providers and really experienced providers, mid-level and, you know, newly graduated. We're going to try to make that distinction because sometimes I think with our education, you feel different at different ages. When you're young and newly graduated, you just want to do your CEs. When you're like me, you want to like find something interesting and you're like, oh, I actually want to spend time and, you know, read about this. So we're going to try to do more kind of leveling of our CEs as well.
Could be also a fantastic way to get those who haven't historically gone to meetings to get back. So I hope we'll be able to get the word out. This podcast hopefully will help do that, to help people understand the ANA meeting that you might have been to in the past and didn't find that to be what you were getting. It's changing.
It is. Check us out.
A plug for that. What other aspects of your role with the AANA would affect us as members? Any other pieces that we might notice, or any other parts about that job, surprises about the job now that you've been in it for a little bit?
I think there's a lot of cross-departmental initiatives going on where we all have a piece in that are really positive for the members, and same thing at all different experience levels. I didn't realize going into AANA how much each department like truly cares about our profession and works together to make this like the best association and advocate for us. And so that was really eye-opening. And just the interweaving between the departments, you'll see a lot of new projects come out of that, I think, in the next year.
Collaborative spirit. I love it. I think we were going to switch gears here a bit again, and I'd love to hear a little bit more in your bio. It talks about how you're currently working towards your PhD. I'd love to hear more about that, and how close are you to finishing that?
Not close. I've slowed down a little since I took this position, but after the summer, I'll just be working on my dissertation, which will be nice. But I initially, started knowing I wanted to do something with education, but I wasn't quite sure. And I got put on a grant with a professor there that was creating a chatbot to reduce stigma in the Hispanic population related to mental health care. And so it was just an educational chatbot. And as I was working on this, I'm like, we could reduce stigma everywhere. There's so much we can do with these chatbots, or what's now turned into an intelligent tutoring system. So what I am currently working on are airway scenarios that focus on critical thinking skills over practice skills. And we've identified about 5 main ones to start with. And I've created and named her Dara, and she is the deliberate, autonomous, repetitive response agent. So she has become my best friend, and I have a great team: Kathy Horvath, Yasmin Campbell, Lorianne Winner, and Valerie Diaz, and even an RN student working with us, Hunter Edwards, who's been amazing. So I'll give him a shout out too. And we kind of started this through a research interest group, and it's taken on a life of its own. And so the whole point of this is that first it was just going to be struggling students that were maybe embarrassed. There's so much stigma when you don't do well in school, from the clinical preceptors, from your peers, stigma you put on yourself. And so the whole thought behind it is this is something you can do anywhere. It's a chatbot, and you can change the face to one that you feel comfortable with. You can change the voice to one that you feel comfortable with. And it will talk you through these airway scenarios. So it will ask you, it basically gives you a case study and then breaks down a question. You answer it. If you get it right, it still asks you to repeat it. So it's all built on the principle and educational theory of rapid cycle deliberate practice. And so you will repeat that right answer 6 or 7 times, and then it will go on to the next question. If you get it wrong, it will correct you and keep correcting you. And then once you get it right, it will still make you repeat it. And so this is something people can do anywhere. We can track their hours, see how much they're using it. We can measure stigma before and after. We can look at preceptor feedback before and after. There's a lot. There's even a really interesting scale. There's a chatbot usability scale that we're using, and also a medical artificial intelligence readiness scale that I'm adapting And that's really to see if faculty are ready to to use AI and incorporate it into practice. So we're looking at it from the faculty and the resident side.
I have so many questions. So this is something they speak to, and it speaks back to them, which is so great.
You can type, but we want them to talk and say it out loud. Yep.
If we're in a sim lab, we're not usually typing back and forth with the instructor that's there. So that gives it some really good res. Tell us a little bit more about stigma. How do you break that down in a research study? Like, are there certain tools you're using?
There's a medical student stigma scale. So we're going to measure that before and after and also adapt it for nurse anesthesia. So the other thing is a lot of times the other scales that we're adapting are about stigma seeking health services or mental health. So we are kind of keeping the integrity of those scales, but changing it to seeking academic help. And so we're measuring before and after how they feel. And so it is a difficult thing. We're also measuring learning confidence, but we are adapting the one scale to fit academic. And I just want to remember the term that we're using, not academic help, but academic support as opposed to like mental health support. So we're subbing in those terms, and it measures self-stigma, it measures preceptor or clinical stigma, and then also faculty stigma felt by the student. So that's how we're doing that. And we're hoping that when you can do this in your own environment, if you're scared to ask for help, that it will reduce that stigma of asking for help.
It's interesting because we've had several episodes about AI on our podcast so far, and everything's been aimed in a very technical direction. And so for this to be on the opposite end of the spectrum, I myself had not even considered AI being involved in something like that. So what a great use of your dissertation and PhD activities to develop such.
Yeah, and an important concept, because I think we do see a lot of our residents that are struggling the most reach out the least and become increasingly less likely to reach out to us as they become more concerned about their own academic progress, and for so many reasons. So
yeah, and there's all kind of mental health issues, right? That when you get that stressed or that anxious, or when one clinical preceptor, says to another, like, so-and-so is not doing so well, that spreads like wildfire. So this is something that they can do. The other kind of reason behind it is faculty does not have the time to remediate how we need to one-on-one with really the same educational theory of rapid cycle deliberate practice. The research shows how effective that is. And I know as a faculty member, I didn't have an extra 2 hours to go meet one-on-one with a few different students. So that also helps with the faculty's workload.
In a generation that's going to be, when they arrive on our campus, very accustomed to the tools that you're speaking of, I think that if we don't incorporate them as you're suggesting, then that's an avenue that we're totally taking away. And then us as educators also having, speaking of stigma, we've had AI stigma just in terms of the way that we treat AI, the way that we know about AI. So what a great opportunity. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us.
So you and your team have created this tool, this intelligent tutoring system, which sounds so complex, but I didn't hear you talk about a degree in,
I also
this
have
makes this very accessible to the rest of us as faculty.
So I did work with a programmer, and they did a wonderful job of building. And then there's Azure, Microsoft speech to text technology. And so anyone can purchase that. There are also, I will say, if you just Google create a chatbot, there's a lot out there now that wasn't out there when we started all of this. So there are options to do this. One thing that is a little bit different about ours is we have programmed our responses. So it's a response agent as opposed to like a GPT, let's say. So we're still feeding it, but it will only say what we want. So there's no hallucinations, there's no using it for the wrong reasons and all of that. So
better guardrails in terms of that. Yeah.
That's fantastic. But I've said this on this podcast numerous times. With the motivation, any of us as faculty can do this. There are resources, I'm sure, like you. It sounds like you'd be thrilled to share about your work. And I think, that's really what it takes, is just seeing a concept of, we might hear about a chatbot and go, okay, but I don't get how that would help me teach, or how the students would like it or not. And this kind of exposure helps.
And I'll keep you updated if they like it or not. We're going to pilot it soon. And like Greg said, it's just an adjunct. It's not to replace anything. It's just one more way to reach our students that we know are using these systems and in ChatGPT and used to intelligent tutoring systems in a different way, perhaps. But it's just, and not only for struggling students, any student could use this. So just adding one more tool to the toolbox.
Love it. My experience with using one that I created was that they strongly preferred it to having to, bug me, or it was a role-playing chatbot to talk about the conversations you have with families or patients after adverse events, because I'm strongly motivated to give them at least a little bit of exposure to that. I found that to be something no one had prepared me for, and they really preferred it. They seemed to love the experience and felt more comfortable talking to that than if I had been the role play person in that situation.
Oddly enough, that's, I think, the case. I think that it's interesting that they're more comfortable there, but I think that there's a human emotion factor that I know my students can tell if I'm putting on or I'm playing a role. That veil goes away, I think, when you're using AI. And so, as you mentioned, I think that they're finding more comfort in that is interesting and something that we need to embrace instead of run away from like some of us have a tendency to do.
Good luck to you in the rest of your research. I hope that goes great. We are very anxious to hear more about that and to see how that project turns out. Will this be an intelligent tutoring system that others might be able to use?
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yes. I will probably be, posting when I'm ready to pilot it. Anyone interested, I am happy to have pilot.
Fantastic. Well, good luck to you on that. And thank you for all of the work, the really innovative work that it sounds you're doing with the AANA and the AANA team and all the others who are collaborating to make the resources for members even better than they have been in the past. I'm so excited to have learned a little bit more about that and can't wait to see what's to come. Thanks for being here with us today.
Hallie, I want to say thank you. Putting on my AANA Board of Directors hat, we're very lucky to have you. I think everything that you've talked about today, as we look forward as an organization, it fits perfectly into what we're looking forward to and the goals that we want to accomplish. And I'm excited for the next few years. And thank you for bringing your talents to us and allowing us to share that with our members.
Well, thank you both so much. And thank you for having me. I'm very excited for where this path is going.
Hey everyone, big news! We've launched a brand new Beyond the Mask website, professionally redesigned to give you a better experience. It's easier to navigate, better organized, and makes it simple to find episodes, explore our exclusive series, and access helpful resources for CRNAs, including CE credits and the 1099 CRNA Institute. Check it out at beyondthemaskpodcast.com.